Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by Gerry Hamilton. Going to do a little roster breakdown today. And Jerry, you've used the number 85%. That's the number you feel like Texas, the roster has to be made up of recruits from Texas, basically through that SEC footprint, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and California. You broke the numbers down over at ontexasfootball.com. And not only are the Longhorns at that 85% threshold, Jerry, but they're over it heading into 2025.
Yeah, I think, look, when I look at doing this nationally for years, I used to look at kind of where your rosters were built and where you needed to recruit to have the most talented roster in the country or one of. And that it always came back to me, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, plus California. And so under Steve Sarkisian, when I kind of started looking at the recruiting geographically, what they were doing early on, then the move to the SEC becomes official, I kind of set the number at 85%. And so of 83 scholarship players right now, 73 of those are from the 6 deep South states plus California. So they're sitting at 88% right now of their roster is from 7 states. And I think anytime you're in that 85% area, you're going to have one of the most talented rosters in the country if you're a blue blood school and you're recruiting at a really high level. And there's a lot of ways we can talk about this, Jeff, but that number continues to go up, which we'll get to when we start kind of looking at the 2025 number 1 ranked high school class, because it's really telling.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start. Let's just look at that class, Jerry, that 2025 recruiting class. And, you can look at the places represented, pretty much every geographical area in Texas with DFW. You've got a guy like Khalid Lockett, Bo Barnes, Jonathan Cunningham from DFW area. Houston, obviously, Jonah Williams, Cade Phillips. For this, you combine Centex and the Hill Country, kind of basically like we talk about that I-35 corridor, kind of going from Waco all the way down through San Antonio. It's kind of one area. Hey, that's Michael Terry's included in that group. So you hit that area in the recruiting class. East Texas, the only 2 East Texas guys on the roster, which is really interesting, that you got Ricky Stewart and Lance Jackson. But even you go down the Golden Triangle, you pulled one with Jackson Christian. So you got all the major areas, Jerry, represented. One area I do want to get to real quick, because I think people will hear us say, you're talking about all these metro areas, nothing from West Texas. That's in Lubbock, Amarillo, that area. Nothing from Midland, Odessa, nothing from El Paso. Is that just reflective, Jerry? Probably. This topic always comes up every year at coaching school when people talk about do you have a 7A? Where do you go for classifications? The UIL always points to Region 1, which is West Texas, as a problem. Is it just reflective, Jerry, of the population's just moved out of West Texas?
Yeah, it's very cyclical. I think with schools, the Midland Lees, or Midland High, Odessa Permian, Odessa High, up into the Amarillo, the Tascosas, Palo Duro, some of those schools in Lubbock area. It's kind of cyclical, is what it is. And look, Odessa Permian may not have as many of the high end guys. Midland Lee, not as many of those high end guys as they once did coming through there. I mean, look, there was a run where you went from Roy Williams to Cedric Benson to Eric Winston. I mean, there was a run of elite national prospects, and those are kind of more cyclical in those areas. There's good players that come out of there, but when we're talking more about Texas and the level they're recruiting at right now, the only guy signed has been Brennan Thompson, and he transferred obviously to Oklahoma, now at Mississippi State. Really talented player. Texas dabbled and recruited a couple of guys, ended up signing with TCU. But there just hasn't been as many of those high-level guys. Those guys, the first-round pick, second-round pick guys where you had to go all in on them. But that doesn't mean guys won't get drafted out of those areas. There's just not as many for a Texas, who's a national recruiting program now, as there was in the Mack Brown years.
David Thomas from Wolfworth Friendship too, Jerry, in that area. So that's a place that hadn't produced a prospect in quite a while.
Mason Walters from up there too.
100%, Jerry. One thing that I'm fascinated by, and I don't know if this is kind of the culmination of the Steve Sarkisian staff's efforts, or it was just one of those cycles. You look at 2025, more prospects from the state of Georgia, Florida,
Yes.
Zealous Hicks, Justice Terry, Nick Brooks, and Amari Winston. More prospects you signed from the state of Georgia than East Texas. I know East Texas is one of those areas that not as much as West Texas, but it can be somewhat hit or miss depending on the cycle. But I just think that's fascinating, Jerry, that an area where you figure, hey, you get 2 or 3 guys a year from in East Texas, and you got that many from Georgia in the 25 class.
Yeah. So look, I think Rod Babers has hit on this, and I totally agree with him. The Atlanta metro area. So you draw a circle about 60 miles around, like a big, huge beltway around the Atlanta metro area. It's the most talented area in the country right now in high school athletics, period. Probably football, basketball, all of it. There's so much talent in Georgia. And, the fact that Texas played in the SEC championship game in Georgia, played a college football playoff game at Mercedes-Benz against Arizona State, played Georgia twice, didn't go Texas' way, but those are marquee national games. And you have a staff that is now built with a lot of connections in Georgia. And Tashard Choice left, but Texas has even more connections in Georgia now. Kenny Baker, right? Chad Scott's recruited in Georgia and Florida for years. Aaron Joe came over from Georgia Tech, who was the GM. It's from Lakeland, Florida, has helped recruiting in Georgia. Josh Dunson, who came over to Texas from Memphis, he is from the Atlanta area. His dad, Kenny Baker's dad, were longtime head coaches in that Atlanta area. A lot of connections on this Texas staff in the state of Georgia. And there's so many high-end players around in that Atlanta metro area right now that you have to go recruit there. If you want to be an elite program in the country, there's a reason Ohio State, Notre Dame, everybody's trying to pluck guys out of there. Clemson, Dabo built some of his program in that metro Atlanta area. I mean, look, both of his quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson, came from, Trevor Lawrence about an hour northwest of Atlanta, but they're all from that Atlanta area. And many of the D linemen, the guys that came through Clemson. So it's just a really talented area. And there's one in-state dominant power, Georgia.
Yeah.
They can only take so many of those guys because they're a national recruiting program. Georgia Tech plucks off 2 or 3, but Georgia Tech isn't going to win battles against Texas on a Nick Brooks or a Zealous Hicks. So you can go in there and battle Florida, Clemson, Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama for kids. And Texas has walked away a winner. I mean, like you said, there were 3 guys from Florida, 4 guys from Georgia. That's 7 players. I mean, that's over almost a third of your recruiting class of 25 that are from those 2 states. You throw in KJ Lacey, and suddenly you get to 8 from those states in this last class. James Simon from Louisiana, you're up to 9. This entire 25 recruiting class for Texas was made up of the 6 deep South states plus California. Yes, the first recruiting class Sarks had were all of the kids in the class came from those 7 states. And then you're recruiting the level Texas is, your results the number 1 class in the country.
Jerry, let's go to your stomping grounds. I want to look at the greater Houston area because when I think of Texas rosters that are built to compete for championships, everybody looks at the Metroplex, and rightfully so. It's the OU game. It's the battleground in the state of Texas. But really, you look at a couple of factors. I think one is the influx of people coming from Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina that didn't go back to Louisiana. They stayed in greater Houston. On top of the fact that A&M going to the SEC, Jerry, Houston became like the ultimate battleground to where there's been times in my life where it's been an A&M city. There's been times in my life definitely where it's been a Texas town. You go around greater Houston, Jerry, you see as many Alabama or LSU or Georgia flags as you do Texas or Texas A&M flags. Houston is kind of what Atlanta is in the East. Houston's kind of this Western SEC hub. And you look at the 20, and I say that because you look at the 2005 roster, Vince Young from Madison, Selvin Young from Jerry's Village, Rod Wright from A-Leaf Hastings. Even you look at those 08-09 teams, I mean, you still have Shockey Brown from North Shore. Fozzie Whitaker was from Pearland.
Ratco.
Yeah, from Houston Lamar. You built the core of your teams were from Houston. But, Jerry, only 10 scholarship guys from greater Houston. Now, it should be noted, and I think this is key to point out, you didn't include Golden Triangle. If you included Golden Triangle, it'd be up to 13. But, Jerry, only 10 guys from greater Houston. Is that just reflective of Sark and his staff, and Sark pointed this out at the Touchdown Club luncheon. Look, if Houston's just as important to them as Dallas, Jerry, I don't know if you think so, but I think this is just more reflective of just the dogfight Houston is to win recruiting battles now.
So I think it's a couple things. Yes, absolutely. I think DFW has more talent right now. And some people say it's cyclical, and there's part of it that cycles, but I just think DFW has more bigger bodied, high level guys right now. Houston has all the skill kids, but they don't have as many of those bigger athletic linemen. So that's one part. The Houston area, though, look, when Sark came in to Texas, that 2022 class, A&M wiped out Texas and everybody in Houston. I mean, it was the highly ranked guys. Some of those guys didn't pan out, but at the time, you're talking Connor Weigman, Chris Marshall, Bryce Anderson, or Golden Triangle, but you just go down the list. I mean, so many top guys from Houston area signed with A&M. I think that kind of got under Sark and Jeff Banks' skin a little bit and said, okay, we have to make more of an emphasis in Houston. And what you've seen from that is that, you look at this roster, the 10 guys from the Houston area, they're all 23, 24, and 25 classes of kids. So Texas has made more of a concerted effort. Look, they got Kelvin Banks in 2022. They got a first-round pick, one of the greats to play at Texas. But they lost a lot of battles that they would have liked to have won in that 2022 class, whether it be Houston or Golden Triangle, including the Bryce Anderson. But they've won some key battles. But I've always said this Houston area, Jeff, Texas has struggled in Fort Bend ISD. And
100%.
in that Sugar Land, Missouri City, Arcola area, which is now kind of into your Shadow Creeks and the Pearland Manville. Texas has not done as well there as they should traditionally. But this last class, getting Cade Phillips, getting Caleb Chester out of that area, I think was really big for Texas because Cade Phillips is a tremendous prospect. Jonah Williams out of Galveston Ball. You look at that. Nick Townsend out of Decaney. Texas hadn't assigned a player from Decaney. Obviously, Nate Kibble out of Atascocita in 2024, a tougher area for Texas to win in. So they've started winning some of these recruiting battles in some key areas in Houston. But really the Fort Bend is what I look at for Texas is if you can pluck a guy or two from Fort Bend in every other class. Now, there may not be a Texas-level guys in their eyes in every class, but when there are, say there's 3, you need to win 2 of those.
Yeah. Jerry, I also think when I think of Houston, I think of the later years under Mac Brown where it really kind of fell off. And I don't think Texas paid as much attention to Houston as they probably should have. And with Texas down, we saw Oregon come into Fort Bend County and get a Braylon Addison. UCLA came in and got a Deion Hollins. Those are NFL caliber players in Fort Bend County that, Jerry, in some cases, Texas didn't even recruit. And I know the demographics and a lot of things have changed since then, but it almost seems like it fell off at that point. And it's just now under Sark getting to the point where Texas has a foothold in there and they've got some representation in that area now.
Yeah, it was interesting in the latter years. Texas didn't have their strongest recruiter down there, which was interesting to me, right? And there were some tremendous evaluations that came out of that area that ended up offensive linemen from Iowa State that ended up being a first-round pick. I mean, there was a number of the guard Slater from Clements went to Northwestern, ended up being a first-round pick. There were a number of players that came out of that Fort Bend area, the Sugar Land, out of the area, and then be a first-round picks, and Texas never really ever sniffed them, evaluated it, or recruited them. But to your point, and I should have added this on the Houston area, Jeff, I mean, to your point earlier, LSU is a thorn in Houston if they're winning. They can go win battles in Houston. I mean, from the Golden Triangle, it's closer to LSU than it is A&M or Texas. Just a reality. Bryce Anderson was once an LSU commitment for that reason. Then when Nick was at Alabama, obviously he made Houston a focus for the Crimson Tide. What's interesting also about Houston, Jeff, is Oklahoma, I think, is going bigger in Houston in recent years than they have in some past years, which is interesting to me. Ryan Foge last year, a guy Texas liked and wanted, the offensive lineman out of Bridgeland, ends up at Oklahoma. You go down that list, and Oklahoma's they're going a little harder on recruiting in the Houston area as well. And I think maybe that's because Texas is really tough for the Sooners in DFW right now.
Jared, to your point, and I'll take the edge guys out of this. If you look at interior linemen, like true line of scrimmage guys, you look at the guys on this roster from DFW, to the point you made a few minutes ago about DFW just has bigger kids. Daniel Cruz, DJ Campbell, Cole Hudson, Neto Imazzulo, Trevor Gooseby, Andre Kojo, Connor Stroh, Alex January, and the Coleman twins, all from DFW.
Yes.
You only have one of those in Houston, and that's Nate Kibble. That's a true on the line interior lineman. That in and of itself is exactly what you're talking about.
No, it is. I mean, and look, I think there's going to be pocket areas in Houston, and there's classes like Nick Robertson committed in this class, right? But again, just look at 2026. Nick Robertson's committed from Houston. Outside of that, look at the offensive linemen. Where are they? Turntines, North Crowley. Ojo is Mansfield Lake Ridge. Max Wright commitment is Melissa. I mean, Zayden Krempen, Prosper. Prosper has 4 Power 4 linemen starting for them. Prosper. It's just the bigger bodies and the guys that Texas is offering on the lines are in Dallas. The top defensive lineman in this class, Jamion Winfield's a Mississippi move-in. He moved into Richardson, DFW area. So any way you slice it right now, the bigger bodies are of the Texas level guys that they're saying these are good enough guys for us to offer and go after. There's just more of them in DFW, and that is reflective in your state championships, in football, in basketball. There's a dominance right now in the DFW area, and that doesn't mean there's not talent in Houston. I think it's more spread out in Houston is the big part of that.
Jerry, I want to come back to the Southeast, the SEC footprint, but I want to go out to California for a minute. 8 scholarship guys on the roster from California. You know, DeAndre Moore is going to be a starter for this team. Brandon Baker, at this point, we expect to be a starter. You get Jack Anderson, Emmett Mosley out of the portal. Josiah Sharma, one of the young guys on this roster I think everybody's excited about. But, Jerry, it's not just Southern California where Sark has his roots. They can go into Northern California, kind of that San Francisco, Oakland metro area, even on the outskirts. The experience this staff has on the West Coast, I don't see them stopping tapping into that. And at a time where, you know, USC doesn't exactly have, the clout that they normally would. UCLA is off in the weeds, and Cal and Stanford, I still forget that they're in the ACC.
Right.
There's probably, Jerry, never been a better time. If you're going to be an outsider recruiting the state of California, probably never been a better time than now to go in.
No, because Oregon and USC will fight for some guys, but look, there's not as much talent in numbers in California as there used to be. It's not like Florida. Remember, it used to be California, Florida, Texas every year in the NFL draft. Now it's more Texas, Florida, and Georgia is where the highest number of high-end prospects are. There's talent in California. Don't get me wrong. There's just not as many guys as there used to be. And I know this from working the Under Armour camps when I was ESPN, building the Under Armour camps in L.A., in those areas. But yeah, I mean, look, A&M had success in California, in NorCal last year. The hire of Johnny Nansen really helps Texas north of SoCal, because if you look at the staff, the SoCal ties are Steve Sarkisian, Chris Jackson, right? I mean, that's some solid ties, modern day SoCal guys. Johnny Nansen really helps Texas in NorCal. Without Johnny Nansen, Josiah Sharma's not at Texas, no matter if Kenny Baker's recruiting him or not. Jack injuries. Johnny Nansen's done really good work out of the portal on kids out of California. And Jack Indries is a Danville guy, right? Now, Emmett Mosley was a SoCal guy out of the portal, the guy that Chris Jackson and Steve Sarkisian liked originally. But again, Johnny Nansen, and that's why he's trying to get Texas and Las Vegas a little bit as well. He's got 2 decades of recruiting all around the state of California and into the Las Vegas area. So it's really Johnny Nansen, that hire of Johnny Nansen, that's helped Texas in NorCal. And again, Josiah Sharma doesn't happen without Johnny Nansen, no matter if Kenny Baker's the D-line coach or not.
Jerry, I'll call this the Grand Canyon triangle, if you will. If you put a triangle between Vegas, Phoenix, and the LA metro area, man, I felt like that was an area post-national championship that Mac Brown didn't hone in enough on, but that Sark has.
Yes.
You get Bijan Robinson out of that part of the country. I just feel like there's something, Jerry, the kids from Phoenix and the kid, the occasional kid from Vegas and the kids from Southern California, it seems like they fit at Texas really well. I don't know if that's a climate thing or an environment thing or a metro thing, but they just seem to be really good fits at Texas.
No, I agree. I think it reminds them of home too. Look, I mean, it's hotter in Phoenix, but not by much. It's dry heat. But right, look, the hill country of Austin, the city of Austin. If you live in Phoenix, Scottsdale, there's a home type of feel. In SoCal, a home type of feel. The topography, the geography, everything around it kind of gives you that home type of feel. There's also this, I think, is big. A lot of direct flights from Austin.
Yeah.
Easier flights, right? I mean, because if these kids, this is where Texas has a chance in the SEC now. And I think the A&M's trying to make a little hay here too, although it's more difficult flying to Houston and driving to College Station. But look, if you're in Arizona, if you're a family in SoCal, Brandon Baker, and it comes down to Ohio State and Texas for you, man, it's a lot easier, cleaner trips for a family to jump into John Wayne Airport in Orange County and fly over to Austin.
Yep.
That's just a reality. So travel's part of this. So, but if you're looking now at the SEC, one of the things that Texas has an advantage of in the SEC, and again, A&M's tried to work on this, use this as well. They're the closest SEC programs to the state of California and Arizona. And it wasn't always that way. And, you having Jeff Banks, who recruited so well at Arizona, at Texas A&M, I think really helps Texas here. You got Kyle Allen. You got the stud receiver out of the Phoenix area in the same year. So, I mean, look, Jeff Banks has recruited that area a long time. Johnny Nance has recruited that area a long time. And even though Dwayne Akina his recruiting role may not be as much on the road, he's recruited those areas for a long time too. So Texas is in position to do well in Arizona. But again, I think it really comes down to you're the most Western SEC school, and you have the biggest city, and you have the city that kids can come to and it says, man, that's just going to be a home feeling, and I can play in the SEC. It's a really good place to be if you're Texas.
Jerry, we'll close with this. If whether you look in Louisiana with Alan Clark or you look in Florida with Chad Scott, and even like we've talked about before with the support staff hires you made, whether it's Aaron Joe or Josh Johnson, Sark has managed to put a lot of resources in Louisiana, in Florida, and in Georgia. Do you see Sark maybe doubling down on that going forward? Or is the next step, hey, let's move in, kind of close it in and see if we can get a little more from Mississippi and Alabama?
Yeah, no, I think Texas is recruiting more players out of Florida than ever, and they have more resources, meaning feet on the ground. I mean, Kenodo Hudson will be on the road recruiting in Florida. Chad Scott, Mark Orfe. You have 3 assistants dedicated to recruiting in that state. And Kyle Flood will be going through to see the offensive lineman. Kenny Baker will be going out to see the defensive lineman. AJ Milwee goes out to see quarterbacks. So you're going to have, at some point, 6 or even 7 assistants stop at schools in the state of Florida. Texas has never come close to that. It was Tashard Choice, and he would bring in the position assistant when he needed him originally. This has more. There are more ties. Aaron Joe, like you said, from Lakeland, Florida. Josh Dunson helped recruit Florida at Memphis and other stops, even though he's from the Atlanta area. Texas has never had these types of resources and feet on the ground and the ability to know everything, the background on these recruits, know the guys that could be fits at Texas. So you're not wasting time and you're not wasting money. But I think Texas is canvassing the state of Florida more than they ever have. And you're seeing it with the official visit list in 2026. There's more kids officially visiting from Florida than ever at Texas. And I think Texas is very appealing to kids in Florida that just want to get away and do something different. That's the key. Texas battles this. All these kids that grow up in Texas, they aren't born in Texas. So some will like the idea of staying close to home and going to a Texas or Texas A&M. There's some kids just want to get away and do something different. And Texas is because of the number of people they have recruiting that state, how much they're learning about these kids early on, and how appealing Texas is being in the SEC and having all the draft picks and everything they have going for them, award winners now. The kids in Florida that want to leave the state, Texas is an appealing place to them, especially when you consider this. Cedric Baxter started as a true freshman when he came in, right? I mean, Jarrett Gibson played last year. This year, you're going to see Grayson Littleton on the field. You're going to see Jamie French on the field. Jordan Johnson-Rebell, even though he's from Fort Worth, he went to IMG, on the field. All these kids are coming in, and they're having an impact at Texas. That's how you can really recruit a state well. Yeah, you can attract the talent. Yes, there's a ton of talent in Florida. Yes, you have feet on the ground there. But the kids you get, if they're having good experiences and they're on the field and they're playing and they're having success, makes it a lot easier to recruit that state, especially while Florida State's kind of going the ups and downs. We'll see what happens with Billy Napier. Florida's starting to come up, and I'm not sure anybody's sold on where Mario can take Miami. Can he get them over that hump or not? While there's still the questions in that state, it's a great state to recruit.
Jerry, that's a good one to end on. That's what I was going to point out, but I can't think of a time in my life where Texas has recruited Florida this heavily, and usually at least one of those programs has their stuff together and is competing for national championships. But Texas is putting resources into Florida. All three of them have major question marks going into 25.
Yep.
Again, might as well, it's sharks with blood in the water. You might as well go in there and see what you can get. So Texas definitely putting their resources into Florida. Jerry, anything else as we wrap it up?
No, I mean, look, the point of this was a long-winded point of saying Texas recruiting, I think they're recruiting all the right places, and they're putting together the classes the way I ideally think they should, to where you maximize your 85-man roster in terms of talent. Again, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, plus California makes up 88% of your current roster of 83 scholarship players. That is the most it's ever been at Texas, and that's why I'm so confident in Texas' talent level. Now, you're still going to go out and win the games. You know, you got to stay away from injury. Things have to fall your way. You have to keep developing players. But I'll say this. The other thing about the deep South kids, there's a lot of those kids that are coming out raw athletically too. Now, Texas and Georgia are ahead of the game, but there's some areas you can recruit that those kids are pretty raw, especially from the state of Florida. So Texas is doing a good job matching your kids in Texas and Georgia who may be physically farther along with some of those kids who are really more raw athletically, because there just aren't the resources and the setup is not there like Texas and Georgia is. So Texas is doing all the right things in recruiting. I love the roster. I love the percentages of the roster that they're at right now. 48 in-state players, 35 out-of-state players. There's always going to be more in-state players than out-of-state players, even though Texas is a national recruiting program. I love that they're winning big in DFW. I like everything I see from Texas from a recruiting perspective. And then Texas fans, just remember this in July. You're not going to win them all. Some guys aren't going to go your way. But at the end of the day, when you look at the recruiting class in December, the recruiting class Texas will add to this roster, it's going to be heavily made up of those 7 states. And as long as Texas does that, and, you know, you cherry pick some areas, if there's a Ryan Wingo in St. Louis, whatnot, then Texas is going to be right there from a talent perspective to compete at the top of the SEC and at the top of college football.
All right, Jerry, thank you for the knowledge and expertise as always. Again, you can get over to ontexasfootball.com and check out Jerry's piece. If you're not a member, get over there right now. Use the promo code OTFOG. That's OTFOG. Put that promo code in. You'll get 1 year at ontexasfootball.com for $49.95. Thank you so much for checking out ontexasfootball.com. Thank you so much for checking out the channel. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe. Over 80K. Thank you so much, the viewer, for believing in what we're doing at On Texas Football. Jerry promises something involving mayonnaise when we get to 85K. I don't know what it is, but we'll think of something. So keep subscribing. Let everybody know about the good things going on at ontexasfootball.com and here on the channel. Thanks to Matthew behind the scenes for doing everything he does to keep us going. For Gerry Hamilton, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, hook 'em.